Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology, and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com.
Well, I'm trying something different today because, just for the hell of it, Steve, I've got a second camera just sitting off on the side here in a wider angle. Maybe I might cut in, do a couple of different shots or whatever, just so I can see if I can do some multicam footage, even though it's completely unnecessary for this sort of thing. But, hey, why not try something different since these days with multiple devices and stuff, I know it's a nice position to be in to have all these things laying around, but might as well put them to good use, hey?
That's it. If you've got the capability, why not use it?
Absolutely. All right, so let's start with, and I know we've been talking a lot about Apple in a lot of our recent episodes, but they've got a lot that they've been doing with the M series chips, and the latest is this January drop of all these new devices. So the M2 Pro and M2 Max chips in the MacBook Pros that they've just released, and the new Mac Minis. I'll start with the MacBooks first, which is probably a quicker conversation because essentially I feel like a prophet now because I had a look at the pricing on the equivalent model that I would have hung out for. And as expected, it was, I think it's $300 more than the equivalent previous model. So I don't feel cheated there, and that's at full price. I got it off the refurbished store, which took a big chunk of the price off anyway. So I think it was $1,000 more for the equivalent model now that I'm now using right now. So
what model is that, and what's the price now?
So I picked up the M1 Pro 14-inch MacBook Pro, say that 10 times fast, last year in November off the refurbished store for, I think it was $3,000 that I got it for. Now, full price at the time, the equivalent spec, which was the 16 gigabytes of memory, 1 terabyte of storage model, was 3,700 and something. So I got it for $3,000 off the refurbished store. So that's a big chunk of saving right there. The equivalent one, which is the M2 Pro version one now, yes, it's got some more GPU cores and it's a bit faster and all of that, but that equivalent model, the 16 gigs of RAM, 1 terabyte storage model, is now $4,000 Australian. So I don't feel like I lost out. A lot of the reviewers are basically saying with these that obviously if you've got an M1 series laptop already, there's absolutely no point to upgrade to these. This is really for the people who've maybe sat out and are still maybe working on the Intel based models. This will be a massive jump for them. But to be honest, before I go into the Mac Minis, which I think are actually a lot more interesting in this announcement, I actually would strongly recommend anyone who's in the market for one of these just to go to the refurbished store straight up and get one of the M1 Pro or M1 Max models because they're still excellent. They're still going to get years of support. And the speed bumps you get with these new M2 versions, yeah, that's great, but I don't think you're going to notice, at least for like 99% of the tasks you end up doing on them.
I totally agree. Look, the most exciting thing about the M range, and bearing in mind I'm running a basic M1 MacBook Pro and I still rave about it. So I would rave about an M2, don't worry if I had one. But these are such a step up that, and it's exciting too that the M2 is a step up from the M1. But you're absolutely right. If you go and get a refurbished M1 Pro with what, the Max?
Yeah, well, the M1 Pro, to be honest, I think is more than enough for just about everything. The M1 Max only really comes into usefulness, I guess, if you're going to max out the GPU cores in your workflow somehow. So I guess that would have to be advanced 3D rendering and like some pretty full-on 4K and 8K video editing, or some really dense Photoshop work or something that you would be doing with it. Otherwise, I don't think there's any point to get a Max chip at all, actually.
Well, there you go. And so I think, the reality is that, Apple is producing a really exciting range of products now, certainly in the computing side.
Absolutely. I did really want to touch on the Mac Mini, which I actually find the far more interesting announcement out of this, largely because if you think about Mac Mini historically, it's really just been more of an afterthought, like the beginner's Mac, for lack of a better term. I don't think it was pretty much underpowered with the Intel chips that it had, and it was really good for like the server farm, or the maybe you could like chuck it under a TV if you wanted some computing functionality as a home theater system or something like that. But with the M2 chips now, and the base model is really cheap. I have to check the Australian pricing. I haven't checked that, but I know US it's only $599. Now you think about the amount of power you're getting for $599 US, that's ridiculous, because you can pretty much do professional workflows with that box. Which, if you think about, like in the past, you get a Mac Pro that was like 50 grand to do the workflows. That's hilarious to me.
Sorry, it makes you laugh, doesn't it? It's amazing where the world is today.
And now they've put the M2 Pro chip in the top of the Mac Mini line, and I looked at that and thought, wow, that's a really compelling desktop computer. I think comes out at $2,000, I think, but for considering the power you're getting, that's a steal really for what you're getting, and it's got a plethora of ports, everything you would ever want. But where I want to go with this is, I was thinking about the iMac and the Mac Pro, and the iMac hasn't actually been updated for 2 years now. It's still got the M1 chip in it, and it's only in a 24-inch size, so there isn't a larger size than that. The Mac Pro hasn't been updated to Apple Silicon yet, but I'm actually wondering whether or not Apple's trying to change its strategy by stealth here, because there's an argument, I think, that does the Mac Pro actually have any benefit going forward, given that Apple Silicon is all about getting everything as a system on a chip. The Mac Pro, the advantage of the Mac Pro anyway, historically has been about modularity, so you could plug and play graphics cards, swap out the RAM. Storage you could probably do, but graphics and RAM are actually built into the SoC now. So what are you actually modularizing in the Mac Pro if they were to actually advance it? On the flip side, there's the iMac, which is only in this sort of like consumer model variant that they've got out now. Yet what they've done is they've released their own displays, and they've released these very powerful desktop computers in the Mac Mini and the Mac Studio. Could they be thinking that, and this is where I think they might be going, is that modularity in the future for them means actually you get the display and then you just swap the computer out. So the Mac Mini or the Mac Studio now becomes the more important part if you want to, upgrade your workflow or whatever. And the idea of an all-in-one Mac just isn't important anymore, which I actually find ironic, given, the iMac saved Apple and put Apple back on the map back in '97 or wherever, when it was like the icon of the Mac range for so many years. It looks like it's just going to a place where it's probably obsolete, given the way that the Apple Silicon transition's been going.
Look, I totally agree with you on one level, but I just wonder, the one thing about the iMac is, gee, it looks good on a desk. And there's, one cable in, power cable, and that's that. It's neat, tidy, very attractive machine. Looks good in a workplace, upmarket workplace. Looks great on your desk at home. I think that you're right. Ultimately, you'd buy yourself an 8K Apple screen monitor or whatever, and you just swap out, to the M5 Mac Mini when it comes around, and, just move that way. So I think you're right. That's where it's going. But in the meantime, it's a bit like the iPod that lasted for a long time. A lot longer than anyone thought, and maybe the iMac still has that place as, it's an accessory.
Absolutely. And
workplace accessory.
Exactly. And I guess just finally on the Mac Pro, I think that also, I'll be very interested to see if they do release a new Mac Pro, what it actually is, because I don't actually know what it's bringing to the table compared to what they've already released so far.
Yeah, well, that's right. So that'll have to be mind-blowing. Like desk melting and power draining. Or
maybe they just need to have it in there so they've got a Mac that they can charge for 60 grand.
And Hollywood will always buy them.
Yeah.
Because, you can't work on anything less.
Absolutely. Exciting times. All right, we'll move on to our next topic now. And speaking of making lots of money, James Cameron. We haven't done some film news in a while, but there was a bit of a record of sorts passed this week with Avatar: The Way of Water getting to the 5th spot on the worldwide all-time grossing films list. And that officially now means that James Cameron has slot 1, slot 3, and slot 5 in that list. One filmmaker has 3 of the top 5 all-time grossing movies of all time. I just wanted to mark that as potentially insane, or maybe he's just switched on enough to know how to deliver a something that will appeal across cultures, I guess, in terms of the current market, without getting bogged down in specifics.
Look, on the one hand, you've got to give him credit. He's a great filmmaker, and he's probably last of probably that generation of filmmakers or that style. So congratulations, well done. And I guess the proof is in the box office. But I saw some interesting things reading that list. And, we always bang on about sequels and how they seem, like they keep churning them out. And even though they're rubbish or whatever, but they keep succeeding. And you see that invariably the sequels have higher box office figures than the original, even if they're worse movies, which goes to show that, episode 1 of whatever it is, creates the groundswell of support that actually supports a much bigger box for a sequel, even if it's rubbish. I didn't realise the Avengers had been so successful, but of course, like multiple Avengers, you build up a much, much larger fan base. If you have a look at the Star Wars, which are all the top ranking ones, of course, they're all built on 6 episodes beforehand. So it's really interesting to see that. And, as I say, we've discussed at length over the years that, sequels and the quality generally seems to be going backwards with each successive sequel. But if you look at the figures, the box keeps going up. So, that blew me away.
I guess, in a lot of those cases, there's no accounting for, there's probably just a different taste out there for what people want to see, and maybe even an expectation of what they want to see, which may not be that high. It might just be, as long as they're delivering the moments, that franchise is, famous for, then that's good enough for people these days, it would seem.
Well, that's right. But when you see things like Despicable Me 3 or, Shrek 2 outdoing the originals, I think that's proof enough of something. I'm not sure what.
And one last point, I think, which is the ultimate irony in all of this, is that, back in maybe, I'd say the 80s is when you started to see a lot more sequels coming out. The whole thing was back to front then. It was, the first one came out of the gate and blew everyone away. And then there was like a perceived wisdom in the business that every sequel suffered from the law of diminishing returns, regardless of whether or not it was better or worse or whatever. They always made less sequentially as you went through each sequel, which now it seems like they've figured out a way with the business model to flip it around.
They certainly have flipped it around, and when you think of when you look at those, I don't know, the top 5, and look, I haven't seen Avatar: Way of Water. I've got no idea what it's like. I've got no interest in the film at all. But to think that it's in that top 5, and I can't even remember what happened in the original, like. That I think that's saying something in itself.
Absolutely. All right, finally, different story altogether. Just caught my eye. I unfortunately didn't get to see it at apparently 11:30 a.m. the other day, whenever it was passing by, but an asteroid the size of a delivery truck apparently passed the Earth in closest ever recorded encounter, which... I think these stories are good because it kind of highlights that, there's a very active solar system out there, and we're, potentially could be hit by any number of threats. Obviously a nice big rock slamming into us wouldn't be a good thing, but it also kind of highlights that I don't know whether you'd call it like it's flying under the radar, no pun intended there, that NASA and all them are actually keeping an eye on this stuff. And, when you think of that story last year where they targeted an asteroid to see if they could hit it. That there must be some thinking going on, from a continuity perspective, getting some plans in place to figure out how to deal with these things, because we've had a good run. We haven't had a big asteroid impact at all that has affected us, but that doesn't mean to say that tomorrow it might not happen.
Look, absolutely. And I think, maybe 40 years ago, these near misses were happening and we wouldn't even have suspected it. And I think what this shows, is, as you point out, is that, thanks to Deep Impact and Armageddon from Hollywood, we've had enough funding flow through to these asteroid, warning systems, and they're incredible. They can, although this was observed by an astronomer, but, it can be tracked now. They can calculate where it will go and what will happen to it afterwards, what its orbit will be, and if there'll be any future concerns. So, it just goes to show you how advanced these systems are now. And, I guess there's a real concern at some levels that we could go the way of the dinosaurs if we don't know what's out there and what's coming our way.
Well, I guess it'll be a test of our, collective growing intelligence as a species, which apparently is unique for us here on this world. That if we can beat it, that would be quite a monumental achievement if we deflected a planet killer, for instance.
Well, that's right. So, apparently we're due for a big impact at some point. So I guess we'd better be prepared.
Absolutely. All right, Steve, I might wrap it up there. Exciting times. I'm glad I've got all my kit bought for doing this podcast and everything, because now I'm set and I don't have to worry about whatever Apple releases now for the next little while.
No, that's great news. I mean, it's very exciting, and I just think the products that we've spoken about today just get me excited about Apple again.
Absolutely. All right, so don't forget to check out our website, scitechculture.com. You can get all of our links and content there. You can subscribe to our YouTube and Vimeo channels, our RSS feeds, and watch us on any and all of your devices, and we greatly appreciate your visits to our website. All right, so that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.